Hello again. I hope you all had a wonderful day at ALC. I can tell you that mine has been both inspirational and informational. I have really enjoyed meeting and networking with many of you. Well, especially rewarding and refreshing for me was the afternoon session and interaction with the student. Oh my God, I can tell you that these fellows really do keep you on your toes. And despite my outsized badge, I felt more intimidated than intimidating. Anyway, this afternoon, I would like to welcome to the stage a panel of special alumni guests. This prestigious group includes the chairman of the MIT Corporation, Robert Millard, corporation member and association board member, Eric Caulfield, and president of the MIT Club of Northern California and association board member, Bridget Brett. Each of these alumni have had differing paths to leadership as volunteers for the Institute. They also have all been award winners. Bob was recognized with the Bronze Beaver in 2011, Eric won the Lobdell Award in 2014, and Bridget will be honored tomorrow evening with the inaugural Margaret McVicker Award. We are curious about what makes them passionate about volunteering and how they have pursued a path of leadership as an MIT volunteer. They will share with us why they think volunteers have an important impact on the Institute and the MIT community, and why now, more than ever, as we pursue the MIT campaign for a better world, is an important time for volunteers to help move the Institute forward. I'm looking forward to a stimulating conversation, and I'm sure these volunteers will not disappoint. Chairman Millard will moderate this discussion. Bob, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So I got all this paper here, but the most relevant one is from Judy Cole. It says, it's an email, I guess, came in yesterday. It says, well, I know you love to go off script and fully expect, so okay, so I got all, I don't know what to do with all this paper. I'll throw it on. Thank you for letting me do this. I have known Eric for a long time, and I've never met Bridget. Let me just say in the onset, in a rare moment of seriousness, I think there's no better expression of what MIT means to its graduates than what the graduates do for MIT after they graduate. How they wind up taking ownership and helping the institution by volunteering in the myriad ways that they do to help sustain and steward the place into the future really is the source of MIT's renewal and its sustaining greatness. I find that the effort people make on behalf of this great place and the way in which they pay back is in many ways a reflection of their character, and their character starts, I believe, at birth. So I really find the most interesting stories, the most interesting part of my job really is the stories that I am able to pull out of people, and that's what I'm going to do today. This is supposed to be a fireside chat. I have not found a fireplace anywhere on MIT, but I keep having to do these fireside chats. So here we are. With the idea that we don't really know each other as well as we might for purposes of this conversation, and I do believe that the meaning of what we all do begins at the beginning and continues into the future. Can you each describe, and take as long as you like, make my job easier. Can you describe, with that in mind, the arc of your life, beginning at the beginning and continuing?
Do we have time for that? Yeah. Yeah.
We do. We have all the time you want. Beginning at the beginning and continuing certainly to MIT and thereafter, and how that relates to our current mission. Now, Bridget, you're the youngest person up here, so your story presumably be the shortest. So why don't we start with you?
Those that know me well may not say the same. But yes, my name is Bridget Brett, and I currently live in San Francisco, California. I probably am the only person in the auditorium today here in 10250 that also has a father here. So my dad sitting in the middle right there, I'm going to point him out and embarrass him, is here.
Can you raise your hand? Wait, where's there he is. So let me just congratulate you on having a child who got into MIT.
Actually, the greatest part about that story is he actually has 2 children that got into MIT and attended MIT. So the story then starts. I'm the third of 4 children. I am very happy to be part of my dad's family, and I am the second female of 2 females, so it was boy, girl, girl, boy in the birth order. And the 2 engineers in the family are actually me and my sister. And then the other 2, important jobs, but didn't study engineering, of course, here at MIT. So I guess the sense of being a volunteer for life and where that started.
You skipped the whole.
Too fast?
What happened? You came to MIT. What did you study?
Yeah, okay.
What do you do for a living?
I was going to go back to birth, but yes. Okay, so in terms of what I studied and where I lived.
It's harder than you think.
So the probably the brilliant story for me in having come to MIT is that my sister was also here. So she was a junior when I was a freshman. And we had the great opportunity to live in McCormick Hall, so it's the all-female dorm on campus. So I was close to not actually coming to MIT for reasons that my sister thought it was her territory, and that I couldn't invade it. But at some point close to the decision point of having to say yes, I really wanted to say yes, and my sister finally gave way, I think, from encouragement from the family. Yeah, of course my dad laughs too. I made the decision, moved into McCormick. From a very early time at McCormick was volunteering actually alongside my sister. So my sister kind of led the way in helping me understand that I could do well in my classes, be a volunteer, be on a sport, and have fun while doing all of it. So I also came to MIT knowing that I wanted to study ocean engineering. I was one of 4 that had that brilliant idea of the class of 2006. So there weren't very many of us, but it was a great course to study.
And then what did you do after you got out of MIT?
Yeah, so post MIT, I worked for a year in consulting in Boston, and then went on back to MIT to get my master's degree in ocean systems management, also from the course 13. And then from there, went to Houston, Texas, and worked for ExxonMobil in the natural gas business for about 6.5 years. And then now, as of about a year ago, I moved to San Francisco and work in a tech company, like many other MIT alumni.
What's the tech company?
It's a company called LiveRamp. Was acquired by Axiom, which is an Arkansas-based company of 4,000 just a couple years ago. And my role is in business development, so I spend quite a bit of time actually working under another MIT alum. And we spend most of our time working our strategic partnership with Google, and we also work with Bing and other major partners.
And did I read that you have other volunteer things besides MIT? Did I read that somewhere? Or?
Yes. I thought we didn't know each other, but
no, I have papers. As you're talking, I'm actually fact checking.
Yeah. So, indeed, I've volunteered. Since I was a kid. Really, I was, Eagle Scouts in the audience know that that's a badge of honor. From the time I was a kid, I was a Girl Scout, and I got the top award in Girl Scouts, which was the Gold Award, but seemingly most people haven't heard of it, but everyone knows the Eagle Scout. But yeah, since now I've been an active volunteer in industry organizations, so I served on the Young Professional Council for the World Petroleum Council, actually, in my time at ExxonMobil. So I was chairman of the U.S. delegation to the World Petroleum Council, which was a pretty awesome opportunity. Got to travel quite a bit internationally for that role.
So we may, she's kind of interesting. We may get to you.
This makes my job easier too.
Right. This idea that you started volunteering when you were a kid, where did this come from? I mean, do you know where it came from? Was your family particularly
I mean,
service-oriented?
with my father looking down on me, literally in the audience. Yes, of course, it was a family-oriented kind of move. We were a family that would basically, I think as a kid, I learned to put others first in a way. So sometimes that can be, I mean, it's a skill as a volunteer, but it can sometimes become a little bit problematic if you do that too many times. But yeah, I'm really in it for the betterment of others and for the betterment of society. So I think one of the things that everyone here in the room shares, especially those of us with endless ribbons, we're really in it for MIT, and really, in a way, I always think it's silly when I see the ribbons, because I don't do it for this. I do it for like the greater good of the Institute.
And do you feel that MIT itself is doing more good than most other places? I mean, if we thought very carefully when we announced the campaign about what we would call it, a campaign for a better world. Did you feel that when you were here?
Yes. So I think many of us in the room would agree that MIT has the world's greatest problem solvers. And one thing that gives me hope in the world is that MIT students will solve like the greatest challenges of our 100 years. So whatever the biggest problems are, MIT's already working on them. So sometimes I'll meet folks that are facing like natural disasters or like their family, someone just developed cancer, or endless kind of bad news stories. And I think I'm always quick to respond with at least the hope and the good news story that the smartest people in the world are at MIT and are working on precisely these challenges. So I am very happy to see that MIT is taking this step forward for the campaign for a better world.
So Eric, now that you've had time to collect your thoughts, maybe you can try to top that.
Well, I'd prefer to just stay on the side of it. It's good to manage your ambition, I think. So good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Caulfield, and I'm tremendously excited to be here. And there's a thing which comes to my mind, and I as I look up in the audience, I hesitated on whether or not I was going to say this because it always dances here. But when I think about the people that are in this room and our collective love for this place and our orientation about life in general, I'm very much reminded of the words of the English poet Arthur Edgar O'Shaughnessy, who wrote, "We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers and sitting by desolate streams. The world losers and the world forsakers on whom the pale moon gleams, yet we are the movers and shakers of the world forever, it seems." And so when I think about us as MIT volunteers, and I guess I can talk about what volunteer means to me in a minute, but when I think about who we are as a collective, that poem comes to mind, because in some sense we are the movers and shakers of it all at the end of it. So for me, I guess if I had to start to say where it all began in some sense, the science nerd in me wants to say, oh, there was a big bang, and then there was the gases that collected, and then there was supernovae that exploded and created heavier elements, and then some of them collected into an Audrey Caulfield and a Russell Caulfield, and then there was more collection, but I'm not going to say that. But in the purest sense of the word, who I am both from a biological perspective and a personality-wise is, first and foremost, I am the son of Audrey Caulfield. That tells you more about me than anything else that I could possibly say for the next hour or hour and a half, because very much of who I am is very much the fact that I was raised by that woman. And she raised 3 of us on her own. She was a nurse. She did every kind of nursing there was, home health, the sickest of the sick, the poorest of the poor in South Louisiana, rural parts of our country. And who she was and how she thought about life has very much shaped how I think about life and how I think about people. And so a lot of things that seem very natural that people put labels on, like volunteering and service and all this kind of stuff, is just the stuff that Audrey taught us to do and said to do and that she did herself. So we didn't know any other way to be. And so for me, I guess if you were to fast forward to coming to MIT, my expectations were maybe a little different from a lot of folks. So I graduated from Morehouse College and studied in physics and math, which is kind of had a tension in and of itself, because a lot of people would go there because Martin Luther King went there and a lot of other folks who were mission-driven kind of people. And so when I came to MIT, I knew we were going to work on hard problems. So my only expectation when I got to MIT of my experience in this place was that I was going to go and get beat up in the classroom academically and maybe in the lab and get tough from it. And then after I left this place, then I would be strong enough in the Marine Corps sense, yes, sir, thank you, sir, can I have another, sir, ready to take on anything. That is what I expected to get from MIT. And the surprise that I got in that experience is really shapes why I love this place so much, because I just didn't expect to have that experience. When I was a first-year graduate student, it was just after the second semester had just started, and there was an event called the Ebony Affair, and it's put on every year by the Black Graduate Students Association in conjunction with some other groups. And at that point, I had just finished my first semester. I had got beaten up academically. It was tough from it. I had just gotten through the first part of the qualifying exams. That also was informative about what opportunities I had to learn new things. And at that moment, I had been up, I think, for probably about 30 hours. I think maybe I'd slept for 45 minutes on a lab bench in Building 26 at some point during the night. But needless to say, that was a time of great reflection. And so as I was standing in Walker Memorial and the Lift Every Voice and Sing was playing, and as I stood there, I had tears in my eyes because at that moment, I knew everything was going to be okay. Right? That I was going to make it, that eventually I was going to get through this whole process and everything was going to be fine. And so for me, that really is what was the turning point of what my MIT experience was, because at that moment, I wanted to be a part of the leadership of the GSC because this moment meant so much for me. I wanted to create that for other folks as well. Being involved in GSC eventually ended up leading, BGSA ended up leading into the Graduate Student Council, which was another transformative. That's how I found out about this thing called a corporation. I didn't know what the corporation was. And so as a result of doing that kind of work, halfway through, I had an epiphany. It was a strange place to have an epiphany. If anyone wants to know where the epiphany took place, let's just say it wasn't in a classroom, about what was going to happen for the rest of my life. It was my birthday. I think it was my 28th birthday, as I recall. I decided at that moment that my life was going to be all about policy, government, and politics. I was a Core 6 graduate student. I had studied physics and math as an undergraduate, and I knew that that's what, at some period, was going to be. But it was the experience that I had in student government. I guess that's what was called.
Why did you go on and get a PhD when you had that epiphany when you were 20? PhD in Course 6, right?
In Course 6, yeah. And one of the reasons that I wanted to finish, and it was because at that point there wasn't anybody else in my family who had ever gotten a PhD. I was the first of my mother's children to finish college, and my sister is actually in school now. She's gone back since then as well.
Is your mom still around?
She is. She's in Jacksonville, Florida. She's a wonderful woman. She's awesome. I'm probably going to end up having to call her after this. She's going to know how it went.
Should have brought her.
She would have wanted to come, actually. And I had a whole generation of cousins that were about 10 or 15 years younger than me, and they needed to know that somebody could do it. They needed to see it happen. And so a lot of the motivation was for them to see, the same, all kind of nicknames just came to mind of what my cousins used to call me when they needed to see him do that.
So you have this epiphany. Nonetheless, you do this crazy thing and get a PhD at MIT, just as just off the back of your hand. And then you go off and spend your life in public service in various ways. So tell us about that.
So when I left MIT, I knew that I wanted to go into government. That's where where my heart really was. But I didn't want to go into government as kind of the science guy, right? That's kind of what I would have had to have done, to become a science advisor. But for me, it's a bigger, a lot of things that affect people come from many different directions. So I actually decided to go into management consulting, which eventually led to government practice focused kinds of projects, which I did for 2.5 years. And then had the good fortune to have a chance to work for a very dynamic young mayor in Newark. Cory Booker was the mayor at that time, so I was his chief policy advisor for a couple of years during the second half of his first administration, and then was fortunate enough, actually at the suggestion that I applied from two actually people who were involved in the corporation. I don't know if Kurt Kohlenbrander was here, and Dana Mead suggested that I applied for a White House fellowship. I didn't know what that was at the time. I'm like, sounds like a good idea, and was eventually fortunate enough to be selected and got to go work at the Domestic Policy Council for a year working on urban policy, which led to another project in New Orleans, which I worked on for 2 years doing urban policy there in partnership with the mayor. And then started my own company, which focuses on government work. Somewhere in there, I had an opportunity to
Now this is crazy.
Actually, about a year ago, I threw my hat in the ring for the State Senate District Number 4, representing the fine people of the city of New Orleans, where I now live, by the way, which represents the French Quarter. If anyone is interested in coming to visit New Orleans, I would strongly suggest you do it. You will either live much, much longer and happier, or a little bit shorter. And I haven't read this in any authorized religious text, but I'm certain that it helps getting you into whatever afterlife you want, coming to visit New Orleans for some period of time. I'm sure that's the case. I haven't found it. So one of the important characteristics of a leader is altruism and kindness. And so me and my team decided to exercise that somewhat involuntarily, and allowed the other guy to win this time. And so that was a great experience. I'll eventually run for something again, because that's where my heart is. But that decision to do that and to own it, and to know that that's what I really care about and that's my passion, started at MIT. And that was from the support that I had from deans, from folks like Bob and other members of the corporation, which I later found out is actually a volunteer activity. Yeah, so it's been good.
So we all feel, dare I say warmly, that's a gross understatement, toward MIT. We all have, I think most of the people in this room probably feel as I do, as you two clearly do, that MIT was one of the most important things that happened in your life. So how do you turn those sentiments, how do you convert them into something of value through your volunteerism? Something of value to MIT in a tangible sense. Can you talk a little about what you've actually done for MIT and the impact you've had and what you plan to do, or what does that volunteerism mean in tangible terms here at MIT? What have you actually done?
I'll start. Good. So as an MIT alum, the first role that I had, I signed up for before I'd even graduated. So I participated in the election for Alumni Council when I was a senior, and I was elected as vice president of my alumni class, which was, for me, a big deal at the time because I hadn't served on any class office, and I was signing up for a 5-year commitment even before graduating. So I was vice president of my class for 5 years, and for those of you that have heard about the Pi reunion, we had one of those in Vegas and had a really successful Pi reunion. That was a tradition started, I think, in like in 2000 by the class of 1997. And then from there went on to have a record-breaking 5-year reunion. And in that time, I was then living in Houston, Texas, and joined the Club of South Texas. And there are a number of folks here today from that club. And it's a really talented group of volunteers and became an extended family to me in Houston. While my dad was also still living in Houston, the club and its directors and volunteers are really awesome MITers. And for me, like probably one of the greatest benefits of having volunteered with the club in South Texas was that it was a chance to gather with like the nerdiest of kind, at least once a month. So I hope they appreciate that. Oh, I saw some eyes rolling, so maybe not. Yeah, you're laughing. So that was, I started as a director on the board, and then after some years of encouragement, was more or less convinced to run for president. I was elected by the club. So I was served as club president for the Club of South Texas. In the meanwhile, I was also elected then president of my alumni class, so moved from VP to president. And then I guess our claim to fame for our class of 2006, well, we have a few, but our greatest is having started the Mole Reunion, and the Mole Reunion is a 6.022 times 10 to the 23 reunion after MIT. So we had that in our 6th year, and we actually took advantage of the fact that other students had planned other alumni had planned the Pi reunion, and we crashed that reunion in Vegas. So we had it simultaneously with the Pi reunion. And then from there, went on to have a really amazing 10-year reunion, thanks to Mary Ward, whom I see up in the back, who's on the staff. Thank you, Mary. And we also had another really record-breaking reunion. So every time we break records, class of 2006 really rallies. And I had warned Mary about that from an early date. And I thought she didn't hear me the first time I told her, so I called again and just kept calling until she would repeat back to me that I know that you guys will break all the records. I know you will. So I appreciate Mary's patience with all that, and everyone at the Alumni Association who supported me along the way. And last year when I moved to San Francisco, I think one of the most it was a very kind of helpful outreach from the folks in Texas. Our Texas contingent reached out to the Club of Northern California and gave them warning that I was coming. And I think it was a good warning because the president at the time decided to meet with me. So we met actually at ALC last year, so be on the hunt for volunteers for your club or your class here for sure. And so yeah, we met here, chatted about what I was doing and what my interests were. And then here we are. Now I'm also president of the Club of Northern California. And now there's laughs. Yeah, I think maybe I convinced people pretty quickly in conversation. I'm not sure, but I guess it didn't take long. I volunteered a bit for the club and then became president. So now I have that for at least a year, probably 2 years. And I just began serving on the alumni board for the Alumni Association with Eric. High five. It's a great group. You should come join some of the meetings. I think
I'm not on your board. I have to be invited as a guest.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's what I've done so far as a
But you
volunteer.
could arrange that. Eric is also on the board. I think the first time I saw you, the first time I met you, I think, didn't you have a didn't you have something at graduation where you got up and you were a graduate student? Wasn't that you?
Yeah, that's right.
I wish I had a video clip of that. Do any of you remember? Yeah. Can you do an imitation of Eric? Nobody could. That was the whole point. So what have you? Don't be shy. Tell us what you've actually done.
I guess that would be the segue. Apart from serving as co-chair for Black Graduate Student Association and as treasurer and the chair of the Ebony Affair later, also got involved in GSC when I was a student, the Graduate Student Council, served as president for 1 year, orientation chair for a year. During that time, we got fully subsidized health insurance for all graduate students, which we did in 2003, and I guess that policy is still in place. That year, and again, all of this is a continuum of a lot of folks who came before us. We also got what was called a childbirth accommodation policy, some maternity leave policy for women graduate students. We got that enacted that year. We also got winter tech shuttle service to the northwest part of campus as well. Afterwards, and I didn't realize this was considered volunteer stuff until somebody actually told me. Like, to me, it was just an opportunity to continue doing the advocacy kind of stuff, which is the whole reason why I got involved in student government from the beginning, was to be a part of the corporation. As part of the board, I think I've served on, a dozen standing, ad hoc, and visiting committees during the time that I was there, which includes libraries, architecture, Dean for Student Life, undergraduate education, and math. And there was a search committee, which I believe selected your predecessor for the chairman of the MIT board, MIT 150 Celebration Steering Committee and Planning Committee. And then there's another one I think that I'm forgetting. I can't remember.
I'm sorry, did you mention CJAC?
Oh, that's right. The Corporation Joint Advisory Committee on Institute-Wide Affairs, more commonly and affectionately known as CJAC, which I'm currently chairing. I hope there are no CJAC members here to have saw me forget. I think I was just so excited about it, I didn't want to say that one first. But,
this is why you lost the election. You weren't spending enough time campaigning.
That's true.
So people ask me, are you done, by the way?
Well, actually, well,
there's more, isn't there?
Oh,
and you're on the corporation. You did mention that as well.
And a member of the corporation. And I guess, and some of the work on CJAC we've done around housing and also around academic advising. And that's all I can say about that.
Okay, so now's the good part. People ask me, this is the part that's fun for me. People ask me, I've been chairman for 2 years, and people ask me what the most fun part of the job is and what the worst part of the job is. And now I'm going to ask you the same questions. You start, Eric. What's the most interesting thing you've done for MIT, and what's been the most, you don't have to answer the second question, the most discouraging sort of thing that you tried to do and didn't get done? But more importantly, the first, because that's...
Yeah, I think probably well, actually, I'd start with a story. It's actually interesting. The thing that I've enjoyed most is working on policies around housing and students, right? So sitting on undergraduate education and Dean for Student Life, that's, again, the whole reason why what we're calling volunteer, the whole reason why I got involved was to be able to do that stuff. So I think being able to work on things that will make MIT a more, not necessarily welcoming isn't the right place, but to make it so that graduate students in particular, just because that was my experience, and I think is the focus of the Alumni Association, that experience can be better for everyone. For example, some of the work that we did on one of the committees was to think about how to do advising better. And I think we have, are mechanisms that we've put in place recently, which will, I think, transform how graduate advising gets done at MIT in the next 5 to 10 years. And I make that prediction. I hope if this is being recorded, I predict that we look at the figures for satisfaction for graduate advising. And my prediction is that in 5 to 10 years, there will be a marked increase in satisfaction and effectiveness in it. And to be working with students and faculty on that has been tremendously exciting for me. And now I'll tell the story. And he's here, and I was hoping that he wouldn't. The best thing about doing this kind of work is really about the people that you meet. On one of the committees that I served on, and there are a million virtual committees where it's all conference calls, and you're only talking to people on the phone and you never meet them for a while. And there was one particular steering committee that we were on, and this was about 3 years ago, and I struck up a friendship with one of the people. I'd never met him, didn't know what he looked like, didn't know anything about him, and didn't know that I would ever meet him at any point, but I knew all about his family, I knew about his daughters, and it was great, right? And what ends up happening is at Tech Night at the Pops 2 years ago, I'm in the washroom, right, and I'm washing my hands, and I guess I had on a badge, and this person walks in, and he comes over and he's like, "Eric Caulfield," and I'm like, "Are you ready?" And it turns out it was the guy from the phone. And so you have two grown men hugging each other in the washroom at the Boston Symphony Hall. And everybody's kind of looking, and then we kind of came to ourselves and said, we're old friends. And then and then we stepped out, and it was great. And it's that kind of thing about volunteering that's just awesome. And so in some sense, when you talk about things that might be discouraging, it's hard to really be discouraged over time. Because at the end of the day, you know that everybody that you're working with believes that in the end, that it's going to be better. And that's why we're all working on it. And because we are perhaps deluded or perhaps just fully, supremely self-confident in our collective ability to change the world, it's hard to be discouraged over a long time. Because you know whatever it is you're working on, you know if it's really important, eventually it will get done. It might not be this year, it might not be next year, it might not be 5 years, but you know that MIT has a collective will to make this place the best that it can be for the world's sake. And so it's hard to be discouraged, even though sometimes you're like, oh, that didn't work out this time, or maybe it's taking longer, but at least that's the way that I think about it.
I'm writing this down to use in a speech sometime. It's pretty good, actually. It's pretty good because it's true, isn't it? Bridget, what's the most fun thing that ever happened to you volunteering?
I think in listening to Eric's words and then thinking about most fun, like thinking like what's the epitome of being a volunteer, I really look more toward what's to come, because I think I recognize that probably the greatest moments that we'll all see within the Alumni Association are like, many of them are on their way, and most relate to the campaign for a better world. So I'm really interested in seeing the whole world rally around that. So that's the piece that I look forward to most. In terms of things that I look to as being proud and excited and for as a volunteer, one of those is being able to work with many other young alumni. I think I hopefully give them kind of a friendly face across the Alumni Association for those that are interested in volunteering, but maybe otherwise don't necessarily kind of see how they might connect into the Alumni Association. So I'm happy to play that role. And also in the Club of Northern California, I think after our annual meeting, which is it's held each year in August, so we get lots of families to attend. We were in an auditorium probably of about this size on the Berkeley campus. And after I led the presentation, did my kind of 30-minute vision and mission statement and kind of talk of state of the club and looking forward, the number of females that ran down from the audience, female alumni that came up and gave me the biggest hug. I didn't know any of them, but I heard from each of them how happy they were to see kind of a female in the leadership position for the club. So I'm proud of that, and it's something that I'm glad I can contribute for the Institute. So slightly different answer than maybe you were looking for, but those are my thoughts.
So I'm glad you mentioned the campaign. I want to open it up to questions, and maybe if anybody's got a question about how volunteerism relates to the campaign, I'll take that question first, because I didn't get a chance to ask it.
How does volunteerism relate to the campaign?
Go ahead, Bonnie. Bonnie's questions. Go ahead, Bonnie.
How does volunteerism relate to the campaign?
Well, I mean, the way that I think about it, I think it's two ways, and I actually thought about this question before, being one who may not be able to support the campaign in a particular way, which might be the most efficiently helpful, meaning large contributions of dollars or other monetary units. But I think that one of the things that is absolutely critical, and this is true for a lot of things that happen at MIT, is the people who actually show up. Right? So for example, even if I know there's a road show that's coming up in a lot of cities around the country, I think having as many MIT alums in the room as possible changes that dynamic completely. So for example, even if a person isn't able to give $5 million or 10 or 50, showing up there to tell, or 500 or 5, but having people there to tell the MIT story can change a person's orientation about what they would do if they are able to give more. So for example, if someone shows up and they'd only plan to give maybe $1 million just because intellectually they think MIT is a good investment and I'm going to do this because it's, they believe that MIT it's a campaign for the better world. So it's an abstract notion of an investment they're going to make. But if there's an alum that's there to have that conversation with them to say, this is what MIT means to me, and then they're able to say, well, what are you doing now? Well, I'm running the Club of Northern California, or I'm the chairman. Being able to then say, I know now what this contribution is going to mean, changes completely, because now it's not an investment in this abstract institution, it's an investment in an individual, right? They're investing in making more of whoever that person is to allow MIT to make more people like them. So it becomes personal. So that person may decide they're not going to give $1 million. They're going to give $1.5 million or $2 million. Or that person's not going to give $100. They're going to give $200. Or they're not going to give $5. They're going to give 10 instead. And so I think having people to be in supporting in that way, I think is a very practical thing. Also, you always have to have someone who has to set up or to take down, or to, and all of it matters. All of it's important, as opposed to just one particular way.
You want to add?
Yeah, I do have something to say.
How does it feel out on the coast there?
Yeah, so volunteerism as it relates to the campaign, one of the kind of reflections I had on those that are here is, this is not only a rare breed because we're MIT alumni or friends of MIT, it's also a rare breed because we're the folks that spend time kind of giving back as alumni in one of the biggest ways possible. So when you think about that, and if any of you are familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell explains that he views the world as kind of those that have the greatest impact and have that ability to create that tipping point are those that are connectors, mavens, and salesmen. And he notes that it's a rare social gift that people have, but I actually think that this room is probably skewed toward having so many of those. So I think the role that we have as volunteers is, whether you consider yourself a maven, a salesman, or a connector, just go out and be either one of those or all of those for MIT. And I think you'll find that there are so many MIT alumni that have one of those rare gifts. And if we kind of all connect together and kind of give all we can back to MIT, I think the campaign will be really successful.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So, actually, like you were just saying,
There's a mic approaching you from the rear.
thank you. This is a bit easier than shouting myself hoarse. Like you were saying, pretty much everybody in this room is a dedicated volunteer. And when you're talking and speaking to us about volunteerism, you're preaching to the choir. How do you, from your own experiences, and perhaps what challenges maybe that you've faced in speaking to the general populace of MIT alums, do you manage to convey the value of volunteerism without intimidating them and scaring them away?
Good question. Wish I thought of it.
I guess the way that I think about it is in some sense the way I experience it, right? So to me, most of the things that people call volunteerism about stuff that I do, I don't really think about it like that, right? Because the truth of the matter, I get to hang out with people that I like, working on things that are important to me for an institution that I love, right? And if people want to call that volunteerism, then, that has one connotation. For a lot of folks, it's just a matter of saying, hey, I'm going to this event, do you want to come? Right? And so you show up early, you've got 15 minutes, hey, can you help me set this table, right? Or would you mind, can you, break these sticky notes or write, right? And then that person is just volunteered. But what they really did was they went and did something with a friend, hanging out with somebody that they like, right? And so over time, what happens is if you do that enough, then you're forming a community of people that you recognize when you show up again. And now I'm going to hang out with so-and-so. Oh yeah, and there's this event that we have to organize, but I'm really getting to go and hang out with my friends. And being able to do that kind of thing, I think it's a difference between saying, hey, do you want to come and volunteer? No, hey, you want to come to this event and hang out, right? Or, it's like having a painting party or a moving party. right? When you're moving from one place, nobody wants. Would you like to come and lift furniture and to, you know, and to be sore for a couple of days and maybe get, no. We're having a moving party, right? And so you'll be the first person to see my new place, right? So I think it's all about in the positioning, because the reason why we all do it is not because we are punishing ourselves. We like it. It's fun. It's great. It's sharing that with other people.
It's true. Engagement is, I think, the word, right?
And that's precisely what I was going to add, which is not everyone needs to be a volunteer. Volunteers need people to come to their events. Volunteers need people to be there, be present, be engaged. And I think the most successful way you can continue the spirit of MIT is to continue to engage MIT alumni and the MIT community more broadly, including the Friends of MIT. As soon as you engage folks, they're much more likely to find a way to want to then give back, because it becomes their own idea. I more or less probably shared the opposite advice earlier on the previous panel I was on, because I said don't be afraid to ask people to volunteer. But kind of like thinking back on it, I mean, you have to know your audience. So if it's someone that is hasn't recently been engaged with MIT as an alum, you just kind of recognize that and kind of invite them over for the move, just have them take part. And I think it becomes a much easier conversation down the line when they've already bought in.
It's good. Come on, give me another question. Yes?
The back of the class pays attention, I guess.
So I don't say too much. Anyway, I wanted to ask you, Mr. Corporation Head, what your best moment, what your best moments have been as serving as the lead on the board, and what your worst moments were.
Well, certainly among the worst moments, this will count. There haven't been that many terrible moments. The first question is truly a lot easier to answer. And I sort of said it at the beginning, and I really meant it. I grew up an incredibly shy, withdrawn person, and when I say that to people, they don't actually believe me anymore, which is a weird feeling, because in some sense I think they don't know me then. But in fact, I'm 66, and I came here when I was 18. And for me, too, it's been a long journey. But I have to say, being involved with MIT has been the greatest moving party I've ever been at. And it's, so I have to say, nobody ever throws food at you when no one's ever insulted by saying you're from MIT or you went to MIT. It's an invitation to some kind of trust. So I have to say that in the job, which I've had now for 2 years, as I said, the people I meet, without exaggerating or embellishing, the people I meet are the finest people I can imagine are on this planet. They are all, especially the alumni, but not just the alumni, because there are a lot of people who are not alumni who are involved with MIT, and that's because we are an asset to the world, not just to ourselves. The people I meet are the smartest people, often the most successful, probably because they're really smart. They are, which is why this volunteerism is so important to me. They are generous in giving back. They are just, for whatever this means to you, the finest people I could imagine. And that is truly, it's brought me out of my shell over these many years. And I immediately, when Judy asked if I would do this, I just jumped at it because it's just another opportunity to hear stories that I love, that really mean something, every one of them. And so I go around listening to these stories, and that is the best part of this job. It doesn't hurt also for me to feel as though I'm helping something that is, I feel, the most meaningful thing, one of the most meaningful things that has ever occurred on the planet in the history of humanity. I mean, I think that these universities, this one in particular, because we invented the model of the modern American research university, these universities have changed the trajectory of humanity. They've done more to improve the lot of humans than anything in the entire history of the planet. And to be part of this, that is by far the mission and the people. That is the happiest part of this job. The frustrating part is that we just can't do more. I think that this campaign, which I'm very focused on, there's never enough resource, there's never enough faculty, there's never enough grad students, there's never enough money, there's never enough space, there's never enough of anything to do all the things we want to do. And it's not just true at MIT. It's true of the institutions that are the most valuable, and because there's just so much to do, and they can do so much. They're all constrained. So that's, in a way, the saddest part of it all. Thank you for allowing me to extemporize. Yes. Ask them questions. No more questions for me. This will be the last. Is this the last question? This will be the last one.
Fairly new, class of 2012. How do I build my confidence that the emails I'm sending will be received well, and that I portray my excitement to get people to come back? Because I'm all in, I want people to come back, I'm so excited. How do you build your confidence so that you know that you aren't going to be looking in iModules to see who clicked it as spam or who clicked it, How do you build your confidence, or how do you build your programming to fit the needs of your class so that they find that home at MIT even when you're not on campus?
You're looking at me, but I'm going to let my colleagues, my partners, answer this.
Congratulations, Kelly, and welcome to the world of alumni. I'm really excited that you're volunteering. Probably the piece of advice I'd offer there is like how to build that confidence. Really just know that you're not doing it on your own. Find the group of those that are the greatest connectors of all time within your class, and use them. So I think part of what we've done successfully as the class of 2006 is found a way to reach people in any way, and it's not always just with email. So we do a lot on Facebook and other forms of social media. And what we also do, and something that we're also proud of, is that we do events that will better our class. So at our most recent reunion, our 10-year reunion, we were actually in this room, and that was the photo that was up earlier where I was speaking here in 10250. So we held like a TED Talks program here for our 10-year reunion, so we called it Tim Talks. It wasn't our original idea. It had been done for a couple other 10-year reunions, but we gave the 5 alumni from our class the chance to speak about how they were changing the world. And I know some of the staff here in the room had the opportunity to attend, and by far that event just became the most talked about event of all time for our class. And actually every class is now begging to do Tim Talks and all that. I think we're getting cut off. But we'll talk more later. So,
Eric, anything to say?
I was going to say, wow, I think we really cut off my mic. So I'll just say without the mic what she said.
sorry, you did get cut off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, since this fireside chat, as you called it, Bob, took a personal twist at the beginning, with Bridget recognizing her father and Eric recognizing his mother, I think that we are all reminded how much we owe our parents, indeed. how important their sacrifices have been and how vital their emotional and investment and financial investments to us and in us have been vital. Well, I heard once Warren Buffett say that when we are under a large tree and when we feel secure and comfortable and safe, we always should remember who planted that tree 50 years ago. So I think also that thanks to our parents and our spouses, we should never forget our spouses. And because of our personal efforts and having survived the rigorous MIT education where it is tough to get in and even tougher to get out, this is, this is, my dear Eric, what made us movers and shakers. So I invite each and every one of you to keep moving and shaking on behalf of MIT. And MIT, as you just said, is not only a game changer, it is a trajectory setter. And I invite you, I beg you almost, to stay involved and engaged financially, philanthropically, in person and virtually on behalf of MIT and the Alumni Association.